We have a really easy tutorial today. It's going to be the auto transpose on off and auto transpose range. Now you have to use these in tandem with each other because they wouldn't work if you just used one. The auto transpose on off just tells Karma to remember a chord, and then the auto transpose range tells Karma how to transpose that chord. As usual, it's best to get into audio examples, but before I do, let me just explain a little bit more about the mechanics of these. So this destination is an on-off switch. Therefore, it's best to use a switch style source. It could be something like a foot switch, or in this case, I am using switch 1 in the master layer. The action must always be on momentary. You actually can't choose toggle or continuous, and that's great because these wouldn't make sense. If you use momentary, then of course when this is on, then this destination is on. If this is off, then it's off. If we had it on toggle where it was turning off and on every other press, I think that would be too confusing, and it would make it hard to keep track of when the auto transpose destination is on versus off. And then continuous doesn't really make sense because if I were to try to use continuous control with a switch style source, basically, once I set the range, I could make it so the switch wouldn't actually be in effect, because if I turned it on and it sends a CC value of 127, but 127 was out of range of what this is reading, then I would basically just make it so it doesn't turn on actually with the switch. With momentary, these top and bottom parameters actually don't matter. I could have these set to whatever I want. In fact, I feel like these should be grayed out as well, since Karma was already so nice enough to not have us make this mistake, but whatever. So the auto transpose range parameter is best used with notes, specifically probably like the full all notes number. And you could use anything you want. Actually, you could use anything you want for either of these, but again, it just makes the most sense to use this. So with note number selected, we do want to be able to read values between 0 and 127, so we want it on continuous. If we have it, and again, we can't even choose momentary or toggle. So with this in effect, we can actually use the top and bottom to range which notes effectively transpose whatever chord is in memory. It's probably easiest to set the top and bottom after looking at the zones tab, because the zones tab tells us which MIDI number is related to which note. So for example, C4 is MIDI note number 60. If I only wanted notes below C4 to affect my to be able to transpose the chord, then I would just simply set my top to 59 if I only wanted notes below C4 to affect it. So with all the mechanics explained, and by the way, if I ran through that too quickly, it's super easy just to ask me a question and I'll try to be detailed in my answer. But with all the mechanics explained, let's go into what this actually sounds like. It's always easier to understand if we have if we hear it in practice. So right now I have some chord pads programmed in. The first one is a C major 7th. When I play it, it's going to sound like the intro to Stranger Things. Now these other chord pads are just single notes. So with this GE, it's just going to make it so it plays octaves of these single notes. As you can hear, these are just going up half steps. Now, if I were to play the C major 7th chord, you can see that it pops up here in this window. So that's the last thing that Karma remembers seeing. Then I can turn on this latch, and I've now made it so Karma will remember that the last thing it played was a major 7th chord, and I can then use any other chord trigger pad to transpose that that chord to using the new note as a fundamental. And that's because of this second dynamic MIDI destination. So if I play the C sharp, we still get a major 7th chord with a D, major 7th, so on and so forth. Even if I were to play a different kind of chord, like a C minor 7th, we would still play a major 7th chord, this time using the root note as the place for where we transpose to. If I were to take off the auto transpose, then Karma would go back to behaving as normal, so the C minor 7th would get arpeggiated. I think that's pretty much it. I could run through examples of using improper sources, but I feel like that's kind of overkill. Besides, like, you know, you would never really program using strange sources. I mean, unless you're like some super crazy experimentalist person. But I feel like Karma, even in its most basic form, is already ridiculously crazy experimentalist. So there's no real need to go into, you know, any kind of awkward program settings. So I hope that was succinct and made sense. And now it's time for me to review this video to double check that. Okay, bye.